Ladies and gentlemen, may I warmly welcome you to this press conference with President Tiny Kox. There is no interpretation available. You may ask your questions in French, but answers will be given in English. And I immediately give the floor to President Tiny Kox to comment about this session.
Thank you very much for coming to this press conference here or online. Let me give you some brief information before I will take your questions. You can imagine that our session will be focused on the situation in and around Ukraine. We will discuss the whole range of consequences of the war of aggression of Russia against our member state, Ukraine. Today, I recall that it stood 2 months ago since the beginning of the war of aggression of Russia against our member state, Ukraine, and it's now almost one and a half months since the Russian Federation was expelled from the Council of Europe. By taking that sad but necessary decision, we clearly demonstrated as Council of Europe, at least that is my idea, that starting a war of aggression against your neighbors is in spite of your solemn commitment to pursuing peace, is a red line that member state of this organization cannot cross. I am proud to say that the unanimous position of the Assembly was also chaired elsewhere in the organization. I'm grateful for the Committee of Ministers and the Secretary General for acting clearly, decisively, and immediately, and I think in an exemplary synergy. We will continue to look for the best possible ways to help to restore the peace in Ukraine and at our continent, and to help our member state Ukraine to regain its national sovereignty and its territorial integrity and rebuild its society, which until now suffers so much from this brutal assault by the Russian army. People continue to die every day. We are watching the horror of the tragic fate of the city of Mariupol, where thousands of innocent civilians have been killed or are killed by now by indiscriminate shelling. We're all terrified by the images of the atrocities around Kiev, in Bucha and other towns, where hundreds of people were tortured, women got raped, so many people got killed. By the Russian, it was also heart-tearing to see this weekend, Easter weekend, this picture of a 3-month-old baby in Odessa with her mother killed by Russian missiles launched at Odessa during Orthodox Easter weekend. The Assembly is of a strong opinion that all those responsible for war crimes and deaths of civilians in Ukraine should be brought to justice. We will support the important efforts of the Secretary General to effectively assist Ukraine in investigating and prosecuting these crimes. You may be aware I did visit Ukraine recently together with the leaders of our 5 political parties and our Assembly Secretary General at the invitation of Mr. Ruslan Stefanchuk, the Speaker of the Ukrainian Parliament. And this was the first official mission of the Council of Europe to Ukraine after the start of the war, and I got the impression that it was appreciated highly by our counterparts in Ukraine, and we offered our full support and solidarity for now and for the years to come, because again in Ukraine it became clear destruction is done within days. Reconstruction will cost years and years and years. Furthermore, on our agenda there will be an important debate on the future of the Lisbon Treaty and the relation between the European Union and the Council of Europe. We will discuss the monitoring report on Georgia. We will also discuss the issue of confiscating of criminal assets, and there are several other issues on our agenda that makes this session worthwhile. And of course we will have the honor to have the President of the Italian Republic, Mr. Mattarella, with us, as well as the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Di Maio. And we will also elect a Ukrainian judge for the European Court of Human Rights, and that is also symbolic that Ukraine, and member state Ukraine, is still functioning, although under the pressure of this horrible war that should never have started and has to end immediately. So that are my introductory remarks. So I'm open for all your questions. Thank you very much.
Samantha.
Are you expecting anything in particular from the speech of the Italian president or by Luigi Di Maio? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I expect words of wisdom from this president, who was rather unique. He did not want to become again the president. Nevertheless, his country decided that he should be again a volunteer for this post, and I learned that he is, after being re-elected, active as ever, although his health and his age do not make life so easy for him. But I hope that there will be some words of wisdom with regard to the conflict in Ukraine. We all know that this war has to end, so we need a ceasefire. We need the return of diplomacy, because if that doesn't happen, we are all in a terrible situation. So we need now wisdom. We need, of course, pressure of the international community. That's why I said it was important that this assembly unanimously said, sorry, but now, Russia, you have to leave this organization. You have crossed the red line. It's over and out. And that the Committee of Ministers did exactly the same within a day. In the past, there were understandable talks that this organization is always very slow, very slow. That has sometimes good reasons, sometimes not so good reasons. This time we realized we had to act quickly, decisively, and immediately. We did it, and we did it in great synergy. I hope that the President of the Italian Republic will also say some wise words on how to go further. Of course, the Council of Europe is already doing a lot with regards to Ukraine. We do not always recognize that because we are not the organization that can put pressure on a state. We do not control the finances. We do not control the economy. We do not control the military. But there are over 5 million Ukrainians who have had to leave their country to seek shelter in one of our remaining 45 member states. We know that those who seek shelter, they are very grateful for the shelter that they are given, but they are also very vulnerable for all kinds of dangers that are on their way to this safe place to find a shelter. And it's the conventions of the Council of Europe who do protect these vulnerable people. And furthermore, the Council of Europe has offered this assistance to the Prosecutor General in Ukraine, if we can be of any help to investigate war crimes in the country. Of course, it's first and foremost the task, the obligation, and the right of the Ukrainian authorities themselves, the Prosecutor General, to investigate. But if we can give any assistance, we surely will do so. That is also what I promised when we were in Ukraine, speaking with Speaker of the Parliament and a large delegation of Ukraine. But we need now wisdom. We need wisdom. Everybody knows that the war has to end. It has to end by people, by politicians and powerful people stepping back and accepting, understanding that there has to come an end to a war. There has to be a ceasefire. We all have seen the calls this weekend from the Secretary General of the United Nations, the Guterres of the Holy Father, in Rome, and of others, to call at least for a ceasefire during Orthodox Easter. We have seen the response from Moscow, not interested. The shelling of Mariupol is continuing, and as I said, during the Easter weekend, there were missiles launched to Odessa. The week before, we had new missile attacks around Lviv, and we see a lot of new forms of violence. So we still are lacking this wisdom on the side of the aggressor. But I hope that the President of Italy can give us some advice. There were times that even in Moscow, they did take knowledge of what President Mattarella said. So let's hope that will inspire others who are now still deaf and blind. And with Mr. Di Maio, I hope to have a good conversation. We will have our ministerial conference in May in Turin, where we have to discuss the future of this organization, as all international organizations, as I said in my remarks, have to discuss the question, why are we on Earth? Because all these organizations, the Council of Europe, but also the OSCE and the European Union and the United Nations, they all were founded in order to avoid something like a war of aggression happening again. And now it's there, full-fledged. We were not able to prevent them, and we have to understand why is multilateralism not working. That's why not only I myself, but also the Committee of Ministers and the Secretary General speak about effective multilateralism, because multilateralism is a nice idea. Effective multilateralism could prevent us from the horrors that we are now seeing. So I hope to speak with Minister Di Maio about that meeting in Turin in the beginning of half May, I think it's there. And also the idea that was launched by the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, and it has also the support of the Assembly, that we need a fourth summit of heads of states and governments to discuss this essential question. Why are we on Earth? What have we to improve, to change in order to prevent, if possible, in the future, new wars of aggression? Because if we cannot stop it, it's the end of story, you could say. So these are existential questions for the Council of Europe and for others. And I hope that in Turin the signal will be given. Yes, we are heading for a fourth summit of heads of states and government, and then we will have the Irish and the Icelandic presidencies to prepare that summit in the coming year. So if the Italian presidency of the Council of Europe, which lasts until the end of May, can be of help in this respect, that would be important. We do have something to discuss. Sometimes you think, why should we have a summit of heads of states and of government? That's only protocol. This time it's more than protocol. It's the existence, the very existence of our organization and our collaboration, cooperation with the other international organizations. Because at the end of the line, we have to conclude that it failed. Multilateralism failed. We have a full-fledged war, which could not happen according to the agreements that we had made. Nevertheless, it did happen.
Please, next question.
Yeah, lovely. Hello, Vajit Alberti from Radio Free Europe. Mr. President, correct me if I'm wrong, but when you said politicians, powerful people, we need politicians, powerful people stepping back, you probably meant the President of Russia, right? If that's the case, what gave you any reason so far to expect that he's willing to step back?
I do not have any reason at this moment. I do not have any reason at this moment to think that that is happening. But I am aware that history tells us that at a certain stage, wars have to end. And I hope that the pressure that is now put by the international community, not only the West, as is often said, but by the international community on the biggest state on earth, that it's on the complete wrong track with its war of aggression, that could influence powerful people and politicians in Russia. This war of aggression is, of course, hurting first and foremost the citizens and the soldiers and the state of Ukraine. But it's also hurting the citizens of the Russian Federation. Due to the exclusion of Russia from the Council of Europe, there are now 140 million people who are no longer under the protection of the European Convention of Human Rights. This was a commitment that Russia took upon it when it became 26 years ago a member state of this organization. Now, by this brutal war of aggression, the president the government and the parliament of the Russian Federation have destroyed this fundamental right of their own citizens. So it's not, they are not doing only something completely horrible outside their borders, they are also harming their own citizens. And there I hope that will lead to some effect in the Russian society, that people are going to start to realize that these fake stories about Russia doing something good in Ukraine, that they will evaporate, and that people will realize our president, our government, our parliament are doing harm not only to people outside our borders, but also people inside Russia. And the economy will be devastated, I think, in Russia due to these international pressure. The consequences for those who have earned their fortunes in and outside Russia will be enormously. I saw figures, probably you have seen them as well, of what oligarchs are losing now. The good news for them is that there is still a lot of money left, but the bad news is that sometimes half of their fortune has evaporated, and I hope that also will have some effect. In the end, we have to realize the president of the Russian Federation is only the president of the Russian Federation. He is there as long as this is tolerated. There is no God-given right to be the president of the Russian Federation. There are people who can decide about his fate. I recently reread the biography on Mr. Khrushchev. That was also someone who thought that he never would leave office. It costed a few weeks. I hope that answers your question. There are no signals. No, it's really the opposite. It is incredible that it looks like there is no plan at all in the Kremlin where this war is about, just to destroy Ukraine, to kill citizens, to shell cities that were seen in the past as belonging to the heritage of old Russia, and now they are shelled by Russian army. Recently, last week, we heard this idea that the Donbass has to be captured, and then the south has to be captured, and there should be a corridor to the Transnistria, and perhaps from Belarus things should develop. It all looks so not planned. It looks like you start a war and then you will see what is going to happen. So I hope that also in Russia, there will be people who realize this does not make sense. In the end, this is really will really harm Russia as well. It will not be it cannot win this war in that respect. It is losing it day by day, that it's continuing its war of aggression. It is losing the war, whatever the results in Ukraine. That answer your question?
It does, partly, and insightful as always. Thank you, President.
Are there any other questions? Uwe, please.
Mr. Kox, the Council of Europe has thrown out Russia out of the Council of Europe, and you say we have to return to diplomacy. How do you want to do that? Are there still any links, ties between the Russian Federation and the Council? Are there any talks? I mean, diplomacy is sometimes very quiet and the public doesn't know anything about that. Are there still any talks, links where you could say, let's start on this basis again?
At this stage, there are no connections between the Assembly and Russian authorities or the Russian Parliament. The Russian delegation does not longer exist in our Assembly. And the behavior of the Russian parliamentarians is such that there is at this moment no reason to get into contact with them, because they only follow the decisions taken by the president and the government, as it seems. So it's not a counterpart. Of course, there are contacts with NGOs, with civil society in Russia. When we took our decision about expelling Russia, we made it clear that, of course, we want to continue our contacts with those in Russia who do agree with us that this war of aggression is completely against international law and against the national obligations of Russia, it's against the Russian constitution, what is happening here. So these contacts do exist. And on the other hand, Russia has been expelled from the Council of Europe. That means also that it has to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. That will only be in effect as from September. And that means that citizens of Russia, but also other citizens, still can appeal to the court in Strasbourg for things committed before half of September. So there is still this relation, and the court will continue to deal with these cases. The problem, of course, is what are you going to do with a former member state who is now so brutally violating international law? But it's then again the obligation of the Russian state to say, yes, we did commit ourselves to this international law, and that international law is still applying to them for everything that happened before the end of half of September. But there will come a moment. I think history teaches us that there will be a moment that Russia has to come back to the international community. And one of the tests that will be there, what are you doing with your commitments that you have taken voluntarily upon yourself and that are still there? Even if you are outside the organization, these commitments are there. There is another third element. Russia is partner to a lot of conventions of the Council of Europe. Several of them are open for non-member states. You do not have to be a member of the Council of Europe to be a member of these conventions. These are things that are studied now. Should we continue with that? Because it's not so easy to expel someone who has ratified a convention that is open for not only for member states, but also for non-member states. That is studied. So in that respect, there are still a lot of commitments of the Russian state, and it looks, of course, if you see President Putin and the Russian authorities, that they think that they are free from international law. But if they want to have a place on the globe, they will have to find a way to come back. And one of the tests will be, how are you commit yourself again in the future to the obligations that are still there. So the only hope that there is, that I think it was Simon Peres who said that you always make peace with your enemy. So at a certain stage, Russia, if it wants to come back, it has to make peace, and making peace is more than just a word. It has to commit itself. As long as it will not commit itself, it will be the pariah of the international community, and in the end, Russian people will pay for that, I think. So that is, at this moment, there are contacts with NGOs, with civil society, and there are a lot of brave people in Russia, let's not forget it, who are now already paying with being imprisoned because they spoke out against this brutal war of aggression. There will be more people to come, and we offered, as a Council of Europe, all our support to these people. If we can help them, we will do so, and if we can invite them to get into contact with them, we will do so as well. I hope that answers your question.
Any other questions? Then I would like to thank you very much for having attended this press conference. Looking forward to an interesting session. Thank you.